Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Profit Tool Belt podcast. Today is a little bit of a different episode than we normally have. And the reason it's different is I don't have this line of business on the show very often. And the reason for that is many of you are in this space, but not all of you listening are in this space. And the space is being a builder. See, this show has a lot of subtrades in it. But at the same time, a lot of people in subtrades, let's say you're an electrician or a cabinet maker, you move into being a builder at some point. And so I thought, if I find the right opportunity for a builder or something in the builder space, I'll have that person as a guest. Well, today I've got Tomas Garcia, and he's going to talk to us about how spec home builders do the math. And the more I thought about it, and as I go into the interview here, it made me realize it actually is good for us as subs to understand the needs of the builder, whether we are one or not, so that when we're working with them, when we are serving them as a customer or client, again, residential, commercial, doesn't matter. We understand what's going on in their head. And when we understand what's going on in their head, we can better align with them, right? People do business with other people that they know, like, and trust. You've probably heard that before. And so regardless of whether you're a builder or not, I think you should listen to this episode. Tomas is very well spoken. He's just a real down-to-earth guy, but he's got a really interesting background in real estate from the math side, which might, at first you're like, how could math be interesting? But you're going to hear about that, I hope, today in our interview. So stay tuned. We're going to be talking to Tomas Garcia about how spec home builders actually do the math. And I want that to resonate with you and think about in your trade, what can you take away from what you're going to learn today so that you can better serve the perfect customer for you? So let's get to it. Tomas Garcia, how the heck are you?
Hey, Dom, how's it going? It's great to be here today.
Yeah, no kidding. You and I just met like a week ago, and now you're here on the podcast, and I'm pretty excited.
Time moves very, very quickly when you're having fun.
Yeah, time moves quick. I'll tell you what, the older I get, the faster time moves.
Yeah, I feel that.
My 14-year-old son was trying to explain to me why it feels like time goes faster as you get older. And I was looking at it and I'm like, I've been your age 3.5 times. So don't even.
Just you wait.
Yeah,
all these same problems are coming for you too, man. We all grow up.
Yeah. So, hey, today we're going to be talking about, the spec home builders, the builders market, the developer. But first, let me start with a question everybody knows that I'm going to ask you. Tomas Garcia, who the heck are you? And how is it you come to be speaking to all these contractors all over the world?
Really well. So, for starters, I love the real estate industry. So I guess that's why I'm here. I got my start in finance. And then I got my start in the real estate industry as a fix and flip developer out in Jersey City, working with my brother, who was an architect. We got our start like a lot of folks in the real estate industry do, where, two folks, complementary skill sets, one calls the other up and says, hey, you think we should get into doing some development together?
Yeah.
And that's really where all of this started. So we started off just doing some fix and flip projects, and then ultimately, built some core technologies that would help us do our projects. And then we started working with kind of other developers and agents, helping them with their own development processes.
Mm. So you right away, you were doing the fixes and the flips, right? So you're buying a distressed property or a property that had an upside.
Exactly.
And then you just started to apply business tools right on top of that as you're pulling up dusty carpet, talking to each other.
Exactly. It's incredible, right? The real estate industry, I've always been fascinated by it, right? Because it's an industry that takes an incredible amount of know-how, an incredible amount of market experience and knowledge. And at the same time, we're still doing a lot of things the same way that they was done, 50 years ago.
Intuition, our gut.
Exactly. And gut is great. Gut gets you a long way there. But, at the same time, sometimes you just want to say, wait, can't we do this just a little bit faster, a little bit better, make a little bit more money, build a few more projects. And so that's why I've always loved the real estate industry, because it's this massive industry that provides a fundamental service, right, in terms of housing where people live, and at the same time, there's just so much room to play within it, right? There's so many different types of buildings, so many different investment strategies. So it's just figuring out where you fit in.
What was your specialty in the fix and flip when you guys started?
So
Like, was it apartments? Was it townhome style? Was it single detached?
Just single family detached is what we were operating in. So kind of, that's where we got our start. We were really drawn to, and maybe this was kind of the romantic architecture side of my brother. We were drawn towards rehabilitating sort of dilapidated old school projects that had that sense of history to them, and that we could update and modernize while still preserving a lot of those historic details. So that's the type. Those are the types of properties that we were drawn to, and it was also just a great start for two brothers, small scale operation, to just get their feet wet and learn the ropes of the industry.
Yeah, so many companies have started like that. So many. There was a company called Boardwalk in a town I used to live in, Boardwalk Equities, and it started as a guy just buying multifamily properties and fixing them up as a tenant, and then he just grew massive
Right.
by applying, really what we talk about here, solid business principles to the problem. But you've now moved from being on the tools to having, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about spec home builders and how they do the math. Because doing the math, actually, it doesn't even, like, some people love math and some people don't. You found that, right? That's a weird way to separate the world. But, if you want to be profitable in business, if you want to make the right decisions, it has to make sense financially. Even your brother had an architectural eye. Still, right. I'm sure you guys walked away from deals that it was a beautiful building, but the math didn't make sense.
Absolutely. The best thing that you can do in real estate is walking away quickly, right? It's being able to quickly identify that this site is just not going to pencil. It's not going to make sense. Let's walk away. Let's not waste any more time or energy even looking at this site.
Remove the emotion. Math is good at removing the emotion.
Exactly. And sometimes you need that. You need that when it comes to development.
Yeah. I have a funny story. One of the ladies at the gym I work out at in the morning, she's an engineer.
Okay.
And so engineers, as you probably know, are very factual, right? And one day she said to me, Dom, I can't, if I'm ever feeling frustrated, I count silently in my head. She goes, because you can't do math and be emotional at the same time. And I thought, you engineers are a weird bunch of people, man. But okay.
Yeah. My father is an electrical engineer, so I'm very familiar with that style of thinking. And my mother's she's a physics professor. So I unfortunately did not inherit the mathematical and science brain that they have. But it's definitely a different style of thinking, right? It just being grounded and being able to remove emotion from the equation when making decisions.
Well, that's the world you guys live in now at Arx, and we'll talk about Arx later. But how does a spec home builder do the math? And let's throw this in there. What mistakes do you see people making?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how do they do the math? There's so much wrapped up in this question. So we can. I guess the best place to start with this question is just at the beginning, right? It's how do you even start to do the math, right? What are you doing the math on? So one of the challenges that we first faced when we started off with our own development was just finding a site to even look at, right? To even start to dig into,
right?
And so typically the way, and I've done some consulting for developers, right? I've looked at their site selection process. I've looked at how they're doing the math, and what surprised me the most about coming to the industry was that a lot of the time, we as operators are reactively. We're reacting to sites that are opportunities that are coming across our desk. So when it comes to the initial site selection to even dig into something, it's either agents are sending 20, 30, 40 deals across our desk a day. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. Everyone has flipped through those, and 39 of these never even made sense for me to look at in the first place. But thank you for for clogging my inbox. And then that one though, that one's really worth it, right? And so that's sort of what I mean by reactive, where you're reacting to somebody sending you a site, or you're doing a neighborhood drive-by and you see sites that might be attractive. You're searching for properties that meet certain criteria that I've met developers in Jersey City who say they won't touch a site that's not 25 by 100 square feet. That's just what they know.
That's their specialty.
That's their specialty. That's their top of the funnel. a site has to meet that criteria for them to even start to do the math on it. And so I guess like that's kind of the first part of the whole chain, right? It's how do we even get the sites that we're going to even start to run the math on,
Right.
And once you have that, once you have that site in front of you, every developer is familiar with the headache of trying to understand, local zoning regulations, right? Those vary dramatically depending on where you're operating, right? So it might actually be something that's pretty simple, where intimately, what FAR you have to meet, what lot coverage is, the dwelling units per acre, all these basic check marks that you're going to go through.
Well, and I guess this is where, like, knowing those local regulations, if ADUs are coming on the market, accessory dwelling units, or they're called a bunch of different things and a bunch of
DADUs, ADUs. Yeah.
DADU. What's a DADU?
Detached ADU. Yeah.
Oh, a detached ADU.
Somebody asked me that. I was like, wait, what are you talking about?
Got
it. Okay. That's a great.
Sometimes you just have to ask the question, right?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, we call them laneway homes here in one part of the city, and then carriage homes in another part of the city.
Carriage homes.
All right, just choose a word. Yeah. But that's an emerging trend where somebody can find a way to add value to a piece of real estate. Say, look, in its current form, it's like this, but we think zoning's coming along, or zoning's here already to do that, but the current owner doesn't want to do it, hasn't thought of it, didn't know about it. Right.
I mean, ADUs is it's particularly on the West Coast, right? So I'm based in Los Angeles, Los Angeles, Portland, Oregon, even in Seattle. There have been a raft of new legislation passed recently that allows for sort of the densification, right? So SB 9, for example, California, right, where single family zone lots that fit under SB 9 qualification. You can either put ADUs on that site. You can achieve density up to, I think it's about 4 units in most cases, which is great, right?
That's great as an owner.
Exactly, as an owner, common sense legislation. You can do this kind of densification. But this actually ties back to our question of how do you do the math, which is a surprising side effect out of this legislation passed is that here in Los Angeles, right? SB 9 was passed a little over a year ago. And actually only 53 units have been permitted for development under SB 9. That immediately sparks, I think, light bulbs to kind of, at least in my head, I'm like saying, wait a second, what's going on? It must be that the math is not penciling, right? So you can have these sort of laws that allow you to build, but the question of can you build and should you build are two very, very different things.
Right, because the math does. And again, this goes back to how do you do the math? Because if it's not going to work on paper, you can't dream it into existence.
Exactly. So just to continue on down that line, right? So once you've found your site, you've applied the zoning code, you've probably come up with a couple of different building configurations that could work on that site. And by the way, obviously zoning code isn't the only thing impacting that decision. Whatever you ultimately are going to build has to adhere to building code. You might find yourself, subject to any sort of local overlays like historic districts, or if you're building on the coast, there might be a coastal commission that has its own set of rules. It goes on and on.
Yeah. That's why you have to know what you're doing before there's a reason these properties are for sale and nobody's bought it yet. That's usually what I look at. It's like, what don't I know? Why is this property for sale? Why has it been for sale for 93 days? It seems like a good deal to me. How come? Am I the dummy here? Am I the guy?
Or did you discover alpha, right? Are you the one who could do the math and figure out how to make it work? There's two sides to every coin. Absolutely. So once you've got your configuration, right? And then here we say, where's your, how do you actually do the math, right? How do you figure out whether or not this thing is going to pencil? And this is really where, as an ex-finance guy, I used to live in Excel. Hundreds and hundreds of hours in Excel. And I can say, Excel is one of the most powerful tools out there. Fortunately I still have my hair, but it made me almost want to rip my hair out on numerous occasions, right? It's awful once you actually start to have to build more complex things in there. But, it's Excel, I think, is every developer's kind of best friend and worst nightmare, all wrapped up into one nice, pretty package.
And I mean, when you started to look at development properties, even knowing what to have in the columns of Excel, you're looking at land values, zoning,
Yep.
Are you looking at things like the amount of time to hold my cash before
Right.
I'm asking because I don't know.
Absolutely. No, I think one of the biggest mistakes that we've seen and that we've come across with, particularly with folks who are more newer to the industry, right, is this lack of concept of time. Right, and time is so important when it comes to figuring out whether or not a project actually makes sense for you to develop. If you can get through your designs and approvals process in 1 month versus
I don't know where you live
in fairy tale land in 1 month, versus the more realistic, call it 9 months to a year and a half in some cases, that project's return looks incredibly different. And so the concept of time is something that we often see left out of models. We see folks that are just doing more simple, these are my costs, this is what I expect to sell it for. So that profit looks pretty good on a multiple basis. But as soon as you factor in time, you say, wait a second, this will take 2 years to achieve. All of a sudden, well, maybe that's actually not the best place for me. Maybe not that's not the best project for me.
Because you're gonna have to pay for that property vacant for. My mom used to work for the city, and believe it or not, she worked for the building department.
No way. Okay.
And so I used to joke that she manufactured red tape, and she got so mad at me.
I'm sure.
She had all sorts of,
must be fun.
she had all sorts of reasons why permits and licensing took so long. Yeah. But then at the same time, I would hear about, we went for a walk and we had this person's birthday party. I'm like,
and that's burning a hole in my pocket as a developer.
Yeah. Anyway, so we've got find a site to look at. So site selection, consider local regulations and zoning, building configuration. So that's the fun part, right? That's what could we build here? How'd that draw?
Right. That creative part that I think every developer loves, actually, right? It's fun to, it's not just fun. It's rewarding, right? Because you're bringing, you're building something tangible, something that's going to impact the built environment, something that's going to provide, if it's in the residential space, if you're a spec builder, you're providing housing. If you're working in sort of a different sector, commercial space, maybe you're providing shops, you're creating jobs. Like there's this, I think the real estate development as an industry is a very rewarding industry, right? Because it's all about creation.
Great.
I think that's something that I think draws a lot of folks into the industry in the first place.
Yeah. And then we've got time, the time value of money. Now, when you say time, you mean just have to consider how long I'm going to carry this property in the worst case scenario.
Right. So there's time breaks down into a lot of different factors, right? Mm-hmm. So typically when we're looking at projects, we at least the way that we analyze this is you're going to say, okay, so there's sort of the carrying cost to get through designs and approvals, right? So that's before you can even start to do anything with that project. Sometimes there are creative ways to manage the purchase where you can get around this, where it's not on your books until that. But I'm just going to talk more in generalities here, where for the average person, you're going to buy a property and you're going to start working, right? So you've got your time to get through designs and approvals. You've got your timeline for construction. You got your timeline for either a hold period associated on there, if you're planning on doing something like renting that property out before you sell it, or if you're just doing a sort of a for sale development, right? You've got your sales time period. How long is that actually going to take to dispose of this property? And all of those timelines, they vary dramatically. There's a lot of room for error. As you mentioned, with your mother and the building department, if some extra red tape gets thrown on your project, your projected 9 months could stretch out.
I hope she's not listening to this episode. I'm going to be.
I apologize.
You're in trouble. I've been in trouble with her before, so it will be okay.
Yeah, mothers thankfully are generally the forgiving type. I think we might over rely on our mother's forgiveness for a lot of things.
You reminded me of a story that just happened probably in the last 2 years here. I had a large manufacturing client. So they're in the cabinetry space, more specifically architectural millwork. So they build very custom types of millwork projects, right? So still in the construction space, but on that end of it. And they needed to expand badly because they were growing.
Right.
I don't mind saying I think I was, to blame for the growth. Let me just... but anyways, they had to grow because, the plans called for growth. And the first option on the table, let's go build a bigger facility. But when you start to look at these factors, like how long is it going to take just to find the right property? It has to be close so we don't lose our staff. because you still need to keep the right people. It has to be this much of a footprint. You know, the list gets pretty big. And when they finally did the math, they realized buying an existing business that had the space made more sense for them to do that. And then you basically kill off the business was dying anyways, just to get the space, because it was going to be faster for them to convert that business and space to their own needs than it was to go build something.
Right. I mean, that makes perfect sense. It's a very, very powerful story. It also shows, I think tied up in there is this concept that, you know, a lot of these, there's a lot of mega corporations across the United States that are more real estate businesses actually than they are, you know, providers of what McDonald's is, I think is the kind of is the example of this, right?
That's right.
Where there's a massive value to a lot of these corporations just in the land that they hold and the real estate assets that they operate.
Yeah.
That's sometimes repurposing an asset is a much better and a much more efficient way forward than doing something de novo, right, from scratch.
Yeah, perfect. So, sorry, I cut you off there. So time for the deal gets broken down at design and approval, construction, hold for, you know, just the getting the next tenant in there, or selling it.
Exactly. And then you have to build that model, right? And so what does that include? So time is just one component of any financial model, right? There's also what are your line items, right? What's it actually going, like, what do you think you're going to be able to acquire the site for? Where does an offer make sense, right? Pretty much everyone knows that a lot of the value on these development deals, you know, the money is made in the acquisition. So find sites where you can get a good deal on the acquisition. That's crucial. You know, as a developer, that's where you get your kind of your cushion.
Your biggest win or loss is on the acquisition side.
Exactly. And then it's making sure that, you know, all of your cost funded, right? Your costs are accurate, right? It's what is it actually going to cost me to build this, right? And so typically, you know, within a developer, if it's a larger shop, they'll have, you know, a sort of a cost estimator on hand, or they'll have a construction manager whose job it is to know their costs cold, right? And so they'll help populate that model. And in a lot of smaller shops, you know, it's one or two folks like my brother and I, and it's your responsibility to know what your costs are and make that prediction as accurate as possible, right? Because, you know, if you get that prediction wrong, just a few percentage points, right? That's your profit that's getting eaten away there.
Yeah.
So that's incredibly important.
I think today with the supply chain issues that we've had, also understanding option A is going to cost us this, but if we can't get option A on, it doesn't matter whether it's siding or appliances or fixtures, you've got to have an option B, which is not always Home Depot. You know, especially if you're trying to build to a certain standard, right? There's certain standards or certain design elements you want to keep. And if you start to go too far from them, you're not building something that can be sold or rented or leased.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So whenever you're acquiring a site, you always need to have, you know, not just your acquisition price in mind, but what's your ultimate exit strategy? What's your disposition? How are you going to sell this? And I think that you're exactly spot on, right? If you're purchasing a site, assuming that you're going to hit some sort of, let's just use a high-end luxury spec home, for example. If you're assuming that you're going to sell a high-end luxury spec home, so, you know, sometimes finishes from Home Depot, you could get by there, but in a lot of cases, once you start to make those swaps due to supply chain issues, you're not going to be able to achieve that exit value, right? You're going to have to lower your price or lower your expectations on that exit. So everything is tied together. And that's one of the beauties and one of the challenges when it comes to doing the math, because, you know, you supply chain issues might come up. You know, there's interest rate volatility, obviously, in the market where everything is changing. That's going to happen over the course of your project.
Right.
We haven't even started to talk about debt or lending yet. That's another. I guess we'll get into that one in a few minutes here. But all these things are linked. So if you start, you know, if the cost of your finishes is going down, well, you know, that might be good in the short term, but also your expected sales value, right? That's going to be dropping as a result of that. And a lot of people understand these things intuitively. And, you know, again, back to your gut feeling, folks who have been in the industry for decades, they know these things, you know, in like the back of their hand. They have a formula in their head that is running constantly. And so they know it. But, you know, for the newer guys, you know, like my brother and I, when we first started, you know, it's hard to really quantify how those things will impact each other.
And you can make mistakes. We've had guys in some of the boot camp courses and in coaching, they didn't realize until we showed them the math, or, you learn something. That's what you're always trying to do, is learn. And you'll have people sit back and scratch their head or out of frustration go, I've been losing 50 grand a house.
Yes.
I've been losing 40 grand every time we do this. Or I realize my subs have, because every sub blames the one before them and the one that's coming next, right?
Absolutely.
And so when they start to believe that because of somebody's personality or just the way they keep using that sub, and he says, no, the other guy was supposed to do that, but I'll do it for you. It's just going to be extra. Yeah. Well, those nibbles happen, right?
Right.
And you have to learn when to say no and what the expectations are, where one trade ends, where one trade starts, the impact of bad framing leads to horrible tiling job. And you wouldn't think that until you've framed a bunch of properties.
Yep, exactly. And that's really where experience comes in. That's something where, folks who are newer to the development space can really get taken aback on their first couple of projects because they don't realize sort of the interconnectedness of all of these different trades.
I just hope I don't buy that house.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Or you better hope that the developer's guarantee is still active on it, right?
Yeah. So you got the line items, which I think people probably intuitively know. By the time they're listening to this show, they've built or renovated. Right. They've done stuff like that before. There might be some new elements or new architectural styles.
Right.
But then, the thing that keeps coming to my mind is comparables. How do I?
Yeah.
Let's say I find this great property and I think, oh wow, nobody has seen this before.
Right.
For some reason, it crossed my desk magically. But how do I compare it with another property? What do you do in that situation?
Yeah. So, comparables are, the white whale, right, of the industry. Everyone's always looking for the best comparables for both. It's not just on acquisition, right? Because you want to make sure that you're acquiring at a price that makes sense, but it's also disposition. It's how are you underwriting sort of the future value of what you're creating. Here there's a lot of different, there's a lot of different approaches to this. So the first one, at least most of the developers that I work with, that I talk to, everyone it's all about having good advisors, right? Like that's step one, right? So if you're operating in a market, realtors are out there. Every developer I know works with a number of different realtors or a number of different agents, different brokerages. And those guys see a lot of volume, right? So the average agent, you might be focused in sort of one specific neighborhood. They're seeing a lot of transaction flow. Mm-hmm. And so sort of one of the first things that we hear from developers that they're talking to all of their agents and saying kind of, what are you seeing in this area? Can you, give me a sense of what's going on in this neighborhood. Can you provide me with some comps? Those comps are typically done on sort of what you would expect, right? It's what are recent transactions that have sold in this area, the similar construction quality, similar architectural style. Are the amenities the same? Maybe we have a pool on this one and that doesn't.
Busy street versus all that stuff. Yeah,
exactly. Schools, like all of that stuff comes into play, right? Comps are very much an art. We can try, I'm not sure why I'm getting fuzzed out here, but we can try to make them, as much of a science as possible. But at the end of the day, it kind of has to pass that basic smell test, right?
Yeah.
You see a comp, it either is a comp or isn't. And pretty much every operator is going to make that distinction for themselves. So one of the best ways to make sure that you're making correct decisions is to get as much data as possible, get as much information. So that's where really, leveraging your network, leveraging the agents that you work with, who are out there, who might be seeing things that you're not seeing. That's a good way to just get this kind of broad base to then start to dig into.
Yeah. There's a lot to it.
Yeah.
And then you're putting up your own money or money that you've gathered from investors.
Right.
And who generally you're pretty tied to those investors, whether they're personal relationships or promises you've made to the bank.
Exactly. And that's where, I think it's a huge source of, it's both good and bad, right? If you're very, very close with your LP investors, if they're friends and family related, you don't want to lose their money, right? You want to make sure that this project is as airtight as possible, from the get-go, right? It's doing everything you can do to ensure that your odds of success go up as high as possible, right? It's leaving nothing to chance. And I think that's really what separates sort of the top tier developers from the folks who are more doing this in a less rigorous fashion, right? It's leaving nothing to chance. It's making sure you've done your homework, you have your experience, and you know that when you're breaking ground or when you're purchasing a property, when you're making an offer, that is a site that has very high probability of working out for you.
There's a lot to it.
A lot to it. Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned lenders. Do you want to dive into?
Yeah. Well,
because that's always,
let's hit lenders. Yeah.
So I think, so this is actually, from my, from my work, kind of reviewing other developers' financial models. If you have a financial model right now, that's kind of your baby, you built that thing up over years, go back right now and start to scrub the debt component of that model.
What does that mean? What do you mean scrub the debt component of that?
Oh, so yeah, this is the old finance guy coming out.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is, a lot of the time, the sort of the construction lending process and the way that folks are modeling their debt over time in their financial model, is a very high probability that if there is an error in your model, there's a very high probability that it's going to show up in that location.
So how the banks are going to lend to you, what the interest rate's going to be,
exactly,
and what the criteria are.
Yep.
Yeah, because they're going to say until you get to X, we're only going to give you so much, right.
Exactly. So this is one of those areas where when I've looked at a lot of different folks' financial models, and this is an area where we found, you find 6-figure mistakes. Not even 5-figure mistakes, 6-figure mistakes. On where the timing of the debt, the actual interest expenses on that debt. All these things tend to look simple and folks understand them intuitively, but once you start to put it down into your model, there's a lot of room for error. So I think this is a crucial part, especially for if you're new to the spec building scene. This is a crucial area to hone in on and focus in on. Lenders have a lot of different requirements for what they want to see in your model, depending on the scale of your project, right? Everything that we're speaking about is in generalities. If you're doing sort of a single home, lenders might be less rigorous on you. Although if you're new, they might be extremely rigorous on your financial modeling, even if it's just a single home. A lot of the time, it's not just about building your model for one scenario. Lenders, their whole business is managing the risk of the loans that they're making. So you, as a developer, right, you have a certain risk profile.
Yeah, you're a number to them.
You're a number, exactly.
Right? And your account has to meet certain criteria, or they sell your debt or call your debt.
Exactly. And you never want to be on the wrong side of that debt call, right? You never want to be caught unaware.
I wouldn't even know where to start with that, because if I went to a bank and they said you're approved, I'm off to the next thing. Okay, that was a major hurdle, but I wouldn't sit there and think, am I part of their portfolio? Is this bank lending right now? Yes.
Right.
I got a loan. It's a win.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's just a crucial aspect. So depending on if if you have decades of experience and you have a long-standing relationship with that bank, they're going to trust you, right? You've earned your stripes. They know that you know what you're doing, and they're going to lend to you because you're a good client of theirs, right? And so they want to continue that relationship. If you're newer, they might make you not just present them with a financial model that says, this is my plan. I'm going to, buy this, repurpose this, and then sell it on. And here's how much money we're going to make. Here's how to pay the debt down. They're going to say, okay, that's all great. What happens in a downside scenario, right? What happens if the market turns against you and you're not able to sell this property in 2 years, like you've told me, right? What does it look like when you have to rent that property out and hold it for 7 years? And so now you're getting into a whole other level of analysis, which is, you're a builder, we're a builder. And so what we're good at is, looking at comps, figuring out, what can I buy this? How much is it going to cost? How am I going to sell it? And now all of a sudden we're talking, wait a second, we need rental comps. We need to, it's not a construction loan anymore. This is a long-term, debt.
Oh, right.
Mortgage we're talking about. We're not just talking about, disposition value. We're talking about cap rates. So it's almost an entirely different type of financial model that the lender is now asking for.
And it's a different skill set, isn't it? From knowing how to assemble a property or renovate, whatever you're going to be doing. If you're a spec home builder, you're building it. But that's I guess why you and your brother started, because you're with Arx. Actually, can we do that?
Absolutely.
Like you know a lot about this. We could probably go for another couple hours here on.
I mean, I'd love to.
Yeah, maybe we'll have you back in the future. But tell us more about you. And obviously, this is going to be how people can find you if they want to know more. But what is it that you do that gives you all this depth that you just reached into so many of the financial aspects of building a spec home?
Absolutely. So right now, my brother and I, so we actually, we got our start in fix and flipboard, and we built these technology tools to kind of just automate this process, right? This is such a massive headache of site selection, of doing the math. And so that's why we realized that, wait a second, we're building these tools. Yes, we're helping ourselves. We're making our process more efficient, but hey, there's a community out there, right? And so we kept having, the agents that we were working with, how are you approaching these challenges?
Yeah.
We said, wait a second, we've already built those tools. Let's get these tools into the hands of everyone else that's out there and help them with this problem.
This is where your hundreds of hours of Excel experience came in, because I'm sure it started as
exactly.
Yeah.
GIS, Excel, and then some statistical modeling software. That's where all of this began, right? Where kind of just literally building thousands of models simultaneously. Like that's where we started, because what we realized was that we're going site by site, right? And so for every single site, we're going through this whole process that we just talked about, Dom. And a lot of the time, back to that concept of we're reacting, right? We're reacting to what our agents are sending us. We're reacting to sort of sites that look interesting. We said, wait a second, by the time we're looking at a site, we might be looking at the wrong site, right? There might be a site 3 blocks over that's, it costs me exactly the same. I can do the exact same building, and that site's going to make me, a lot more money.
Right.
So when we started talking to other developers, and what they told us was that, seems like it's a common problem, right? Every developer that we talk to says that about 80% of the projects that they actually go through everything we just talked about, right? The zoning, the financial model, getting their go, no go decision. 80% of those projects were projects that they should never have even looked at in the first place.
So it should have been a stop in one of these other 5 or 6 areas for whatever reason.
Exactly. And so that's 80%. That's a huge amount of wasted time and money, right? Like so that really gave us a lens on the scope of the problem. So we created Arx. Here we go. So we created Arx, and Arx is really, it's a software platform. It's a tool, right? It's not a replacement for human experience. It's a tool that you can use to automate this entire process, right? So if you want to identify every single property in Los Angeles that supports, single family for sale development, that you can complete for less than $1 million of cash in under 20 months.
Well, those are all criteria. You can punch them in.
Yeah.
Say, these are my rules. Find me
Find me every single site. And also, by the way, everyone has their own, at the end of the day, it's about profit, right? So in here, you could go ahead and say, hey, I need my return on investment to be at least 30%. Right. Don't show me any property that doesn't support a development project that will return me at least 30%. And so it's that kind of a tool really that now is allowing developers to really just move faster, right? Don't waste your time looking at these projects that don't make any sense. Really just focus in on the projects that you really should be doing further diligence on, that you should be kicking the tires on.
What's interesting, and I don't know if you guys have approached this the same way. I'm a business coach, so I try to take these problems and find, there's opportunities, there's challenges, there's bottlenecks, things like that. But I try to apply models that'll help you find easy ways to get through it. And one of the things that you guys have done, I don't know if you know this, but if we look at lean manufacturing, you're like, Rubino, where the heck are you going with this? But there's 8 places that we have waste built into our companies. And one of them is overproduction. And so 80% of the deals you look at and do all your due diligence on and spend a couple of weeks of time and money and effort, that's overproduction. So your Arx, I guess, solves the overproduction problem because you can simplify it. And then I'm not overproducing my time saying, these are the criteria. I want to invest this much money. I want to have these type of site specific conditions, and I want this kind of return. Obviously you still apply your gut to that.
Yes, 100%.
Right? You still apply your gut to that, but at the same time, it helps you take that 80%, maybe make it 30%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just another tool in your toolkit, right? And that's what we always say, right? We're using, Arx at the end of the day, it's a program. It runs on a computer. It's got a lot of formulas that are running in the background there to sort of simplify all this analysis. But at the end of the day, there's formulas, right? It's a tool that you can use. So it's not a replacement for human experience. You're always going to have to look at the numbers. You're always going to have to make adjustments, but it's going to get you 90% of the way there. And then you use your experience as an operator to actually, fill in the rest.
Yeah.
That's the whole ethos of this.
The fact that you've been going to city council meetings for 6 months and you know that a new rapid transit line is going to be put in 3 blocks away from this property, but nobody else knows it. You're taking a bet that it's going to happen. And
exactly. And that's exactly where that's really the vision here, right? Is that it's all about how can you leverage technology to actually empower you to do more, right? So you have your own human experience, you have your own human knowledge. And so that's a great example of saying, actually, I know something that, that doesn't show up in the data, but let's still leverage the data in order to make that, the impact of that knowledge even more powerful.
Right. Yeah. Because if it makes sense today, and this does go through, it'll make more sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love it. And this works for commercial properties as well.
So right now, actually, we're solely focused on small scale residential spaces. So single family up to 4 units. We are going to be expanding that to include basically up to about 15 units. And we are looking at short plat townhome development as well. Ultimately, the tool is going to expand to cover all asset classes, all investment strategies, all geographies. But right now, we're just sort of hyper focused on helping spec home builders, deliver more housing where needed.
We haven't told anybody who we is. You said Arx, and I could see your T-shirt.
Arx. Yes.
Yeah. And so for people who are listening to this as an audio, this is on YouTube as a video too, so you can see Tomas's nice Arx.
Okay. Sorry.
Who's Arx, and how do we find you?
So absolutely. So to find us, you can just go to Arx. That's ARX .city, CITY. So that's our website. We are an automated underwriting and market intelligence platform. So we help real estate professionals, that's developers, agents, investors, figure out how to, what types of projects they should be doing, where they should be doing them in order to generate, the most revenue for themselves. So it's really, it's a tool that helps folks cut through all this noise. I'm the co-founder of the business. My brother, so my former continued partner in crime from the development side, he's the other co-founder, and we have a great team that's really just passionate about making development easier. Because a lot of the time it's so unnecessarily complicated. Doing the math is so unnecessarily mind-numbing. That anything you can do to, I know. That's a bold statement, right? I'm gonna get a lot of hate mail after that. So you can check out our website. It's again, it's arx.city. There's a quick video on there, so you can see kind of what the actual platform looks like. If anyone wants to reach me, I'm pretty easy to reach. It's my name, Tomas, Tomas, at arx.city. So that's shoot me an email. One of my favorite parts of my job is that we are always getting to meet new people and talk to developers, new geographies, doing different strategies, and really just kind of talking shop and figuring out how we can best help them. So I always love talking to new folks.
Yeah. Well, hey guys, reach out to Tomas if you have questions, and then reach out to me and let me know if there are other questions you think I should have asked Tomas that I missed. I'm sure there's a ton, and there are some curiosities out there. But hey, thank you for being on the show. I know you're incredibly busy. Lots is going on in the market. And then you're in all sorts of markets at the same time. So you've got little hot spots popping up. And
yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Fun.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. And maybe we'll have you back again in the future.
Sounds great. No, thank you for having me on, Dom. I really appreciate it. It's great conversation.
Good. Thanks, Tomas. Have a great day.
Right. Have a good one.
Bye.
Well. Tomas, thank you so much for being with us today. I got 2.5 pages of notes here. My arm is killing me. How spec home builders do the math. It's interesting. You broke it down so nicely into a bunch of different areas. For those of you listening, if you weren't taking notes because you were driving in between jobs, maybe on the job site while you're listening to this, a couple of the high points that we talked about today is first you have to select the right site. Then you have to know your local regulations and zoning. And every city's got its little nuances, its little quirks, things that are happening, things that aren't happening. In the show, you heard me talk about if transit is coming to an area. But there's going to be things in your city, for instance, something crazy. Maybe a certain part of town gets a funny smell at a certain time of year. I'm not kidding, because they're processing some sort of food upwind of that. And that affects home values in a positive or a negative way. And so that maybe that business is going to close down and that smell is no longer going to be an issue. Some of you are laughing or shaking your head, but others are going, I know exactly what Dom means. And I know how that's going to impact property values. And then from there on, you can start to make your business decisions, because you can't replace that local knowledge, those little pieces of information that you pick up. So anyways, number 2 is local regulations and zoning. 3 is building configuration, the funnest part of the job, right? Sketching out, what are we going to build here? How's that going to look? Time for a deal to develop was interesting. I think that's one that I have often considered when I've been doing more renovations than, for my own properties than building. But, how long does it take for design and approval, which to me is like watching paint dry and even more stressful. Constructing time, like the building time itself. How long are you going to hold it after it's done before you can sell it to somebody or move a tenant in there, whether it's commercial or residential, right? And then obviously the line items. What's it going to cost to build the level and quality of property that you want? And then comparables. And then lenders. It's so anyways, a ton of different areas. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Tomas. If you like this kind of episode, let me know. And listen, if you think that this doesn't apply as well, let me know that too. Regardless, I need to hear from you so that we understand whether this helped you understand how you do business a little bit better. Because that's the goal of listening to the show, right? It's educational, it's inspirational. I want to bring you different perspectives because I want to get you out of the headspace where you think that you do tiling and the whole world is about tiling, where you do framing or you do renovations and you think the whole world is about renovations. It's not. It's not. There's a bigger picture here, especially for those of you who serve, who have as your clients builders and land developers. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for checking in.